I've been sitting here in my office for quite some time this morning, just looking out the window and thinking about the concept of home. You and we have reached the stage in our lives where we understand that a house is so much more than just four walls and a roof. It is a container for memories, a witness to our struggles, and the very foundation of who we become. But let me ask you a question that has been weighing heavily on my heart today. If you had to guess the specific address where the creator of the universe spent his childhood, where would you look? Would you look for a golden palace in a great capital city, or perhaps a grand estate surrounded by high walls? We often imagine the divine in the clouds or in magnificent cathedrals, but the reality is far more grounding, far more humble, and frankly, far more beautiful than anything a king could build. You see, I have spent decades studying history and faith, and I've come to realize that we often miss the most profound truths because they are hidden under layers of dust and the simple routine of daily life. Today I want to talk to you about what I call the forgotten address of God. It is a place that the world considered to be absolutely nothing. In fact, people back then used to mock it. They would say, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" It was a dead-end village, a tiny speck on a map that most people would ignore. And yet, that is exactly where the story that changed the entire world began to take shape. Think about your own life for a moment. Do you ever feel like the modern world has become too fast, too disposable, and perhaps a bit rootless? We live in an age where things are built to be replaced, and sometimes it feels like our own stories, the hard work of our hands, and the homes we've spent a lifetime building are being overlooked. But what if I told you that the most important house in human history wasn't made of marble and gold, but of rough, cold limestone carved directly into a hillside? What if I told you that the very walls that Mary cleaned and where a young boy named Jesus learned to walk have been preserved, waiting for us to find them? I want you to imagine a scene with me. It's the year 1881. In a quiet convent belonging to the Sisters of Nazareth, some workers are doing routine renovations. They aren't looking for a miracle. They are just doing their jobs, much like we have done our whole lives. Suddenly, they hit something solid beneath the flagstones. As they dig deeper, they realize they aren't just looking at old foundations. They are descending into a secret that the earth has kept for 2,000 years. Can you picture the transition? Leaving the bright, scorching Israeli sun and stepping down into the damp, cool darkness of an ancient basement. The air smells of wet earth and old stone. It's a silence that feels heavy with importance. Why did Byzantine Christians, and even the Crusaders, hundreds of years later, build their magnificent churches exactly on top of this specific piece of rock? They weren't guessing. They were protecting a memory. Have you ever wondered if the effort you put into your own home, the quiet moments of care, and the simple dignity of your daily labor truly matter in the eyes of eternity? We often feel that if we aren't doing something great or famous, our lives are somehow less significant. But as we look at this discovery together, I want you to feel a sense of renewed pride. We are going to walk through those ancient rooms today, not as tourists, but as people who understand the value of a life built on solid ground. We are going to touch the textures of that limestone and realize that the apprentice, the one who would become the savior, had calloused hands and dust on his feet just like a common workman. This conversation we are having today is urgent. It's necessary because we need to remember that holiness doesn't require a throne. It dwells in the ordinary. It dwells in the kitchen where the barley bread is baking, and in the workshop where the rhythm of the chisel hits the stone. I feel a fire in my soul to share this with you because if the home of a humble stonemason could be preserved for 2 millennia, then believe me when I tell you that nothing you have done with love and faith is ever forgotten by God. Are you ready to go down into that basement with me and see what the world tried to forget? Let's begin this journey, because the truth is much closer to home than you think. Close your eyes for a moment and let the walls of your room fade away. I want us to leave behind the noise of the modern world. the hum of the refrigerator, and the constant chime of our phones. We are going to travel back across 2,000 years of history to a place that the rest of the world chose to ignore. I want you to imagine we are standing on a dusty, sun-drenched ridge overlooking a small valley in the hills of Lower Galilee. This is Nazareth. But it isn't the Nazareth you see on a map today. In the time of this story, it wasn't a city at all. It was a tiny, dead-end village of perhaps 300 or 400 people at most. It was a speck of dust on the edge of the Roman Empire, a place so insignificant that it wasn't even mentioned in the ancient lists of towns. People back then used to mock it with a sneer, asking if anything good could ever come from such a forgotten corner of the world. Does that feel familiar to you? Have you ever felt like the place you come from or the quiet life you've led is somehow too small for the world to notice? As we walk down the narrow, winding paths of this village, I want you to notice that there are no grand paved streets. There is only the packed white earth that sticks to your sandals. The air here doesn't smell like the exhaust of a city. It smells of the world in its purest form. Can you catch that scent on the breeze? It's the smell of damp earth after a sudden spring rain, mixed with the sharp, comforting aroma of wood smoke drifting from communal clay ovens. There is the scent of crushed herbs underfoot, and the heavy, sweet smell of barley bread baking in the morning heat. It's a sensory experience that many of us remember from our own childhoods, perhaps visiting a grandparent's farm or a quiet country town where life moved at the speed of the seasons rather than the speed of a clock. Now, look at the houses. They don't look like the homes we know. In Nazareth, the people lived in harmony with the hillside itself. They didn't just build on the rock, they built into it. These homes were half cave and half masonry, carved directly into the soft limestone of the cliffs to provide a natural thermal protection that kept them cool in the blistering heat of the Israeli summer and held the warmth of a small fire during the damp, chilly winters. It was a brilliant, humble way to live. I want you to reach out your hand in your mind and touch one of those walls. Feel the coarseness of that limestone. It's cold to the touch, rough and resilient, much like the hands of the men who shaped it. It's the same texture you might feel on an old country stone wall or a weathered patio that has stood the test of time. Can you feel the weight of that history under your fingertips? The soundtrack of this village isn't silence. It is a constant, rhythmic pulse. Listen closely. Do you hear that? It's the clink, clink, clink of metal hitting stone. Nazareth was a living quarry. Everywhere you turned, men were working with hammers and chisels, carving out the very foundations of their lives. This was a village of builders, of craftsmen who knew how to speak to the stone and make it yield. Imagine the sound of a neighbor's construction project that never truly ends, but instead of being a nuisance, it becomes the heartbeat of the community. This was the rhythm that accompanied the growth of a child. It was the sound of stability, of something being built to last for generations. As we step inside one of these humble dwellings, the first thing you'll notice is how the light behaves. There are no glass windows here. Instead, narrow beams of brilliant sunlight pierce through small openings, cutting through the cool shadows of the interior. In those beams of light, you can see the dust motes dancing in the air, spinning slowly in the stillness. It's a sight that always reminds me of an old attic or a quiet barn in the late afternoon. It's peaceful, isn't it? It's a reminder that even in the most ordinary, dusty corners of our lives, there is a quiet beauty waiting to be seen if we only take the time to look. Why would the creator of the universe choose such a place? Why not a palace in Rome or a temple in Jerusalem? Perhaps it's because the most profound truths don't need a stage. They don't need gold or marble to be important. Have you ever considered that your own life, with its simple routines and its quiet corners, might be exactly where the most important work is happening? We often chase the great and the famous, but as we stand here in the dust of Nazareth, we realize that holiness is perfectly comfortable in a house made of mud and stone. It's a powerful thought, isn't it? That the most important address in history was a place the world had forgotten. Let that sink in as we prepare to look closer at the family that called this stone cave their home. Are you starting to see how much we have in common with this ancient world? Now I want you to look at your own hands for a moment. Go ahead, lay them out on the table in front of you or rest them on your knees. Look at the lines, the marks of time, and perhaps the calluses that have formed over decades of hard work, whether that work was in an office, a garden, a kitchen, or a factory. Those hands tell your story. They are the tools of your character. And it is through the lens of those hard-working hands that I want us to look at the protagonist of our story today. We often see him in stained glass windows, dressed in pristine white robes with a glowing halo, looking as though he has never felt the sting of a splinter or the weight of a heavy load. But the house we found in Nazareth tells a much different, much more human story. It tells the story of a man who knew exactly what it felt like to have an aching back at the end of a 14-hour day. In the ancient Greek texts, he is called a tekton. For centuries, we've translated that word simply as carpenter, and we imagine him making small chairs or polishing wooden tables in a tidy little shop. But in the rocky landscape of Nazareth, wood was a luxury, a rare commodity. The real material of life was stone. A tekton was a master builder, a stonemason, a rugged craftsman who wrestled with the very bones of the earth. I want you to imagine a young man, not in a silk robe, but in a sweat-stained tunic, his skin bronzed and leathered by the relentless Galilean sun. His hair and eyelashes would have been perpetually coated in a fine, white layer of limestone dust, the kind that gets into your throat and stays there. Have you ever spent a day doing heavy physical labor, where by noon your muscles are already screaming and the sun feels like a physical weight on your shoulders? That was his daily reality. As we look at the ruins of this house, we see stairs that were carved directly into the living rock of the hillside. Think about the sheer physical effort required to do that. There were no power tools, no pneumatic drills, and no hydraulic lifts. There was only the hammer, the chisel, and the strength of a man's arms. When we look at these stone walls, we are looking at the result of thousands of rhythmic, bone-jarring strikes of metal against rock. Jesus didn't just live in this house. He and Joseph likely shaped it with their own blood and sweat. He knew the frustration of a stone that wouldn't split correctly. He knew the precision required to make a joint flush so that a wall would stand for centuries. He was an apprentice long before he was a teacher. Don't you find it deeply moving to realize that the one who would later talk about building one's life on a solid foundation spent his youth literally carving foundations out of the earth? Think about the weight of responsibility that rested on his shoulders. As the eldest son in a working-class family, he wasn't just working for a hobby. He was the provider. He was the one responsible for ensuring there was enough barley in the jar and enough oil in the lamp. He felt the same pressures we have all felt, the worry about whether the next job will come, the fatigue that comes from being the pillar of a household, and the quiet doubts that creep in when the body is tired. We often forget that he had to learn his trade. He had to watch Joseph's hands, mimicking the way the older man held the mallet, learning to read the grain of the stone. There is a beautiful, silent dignity in that relationship, a father passing down the wisdom of the earth to his son. It reminds me of the way we try to pass down our values to our children and grandchildren, hoping they understand that nothing of value is ever built without effort. I want to ask you something. Does it change how you feel about your own struggles to know that he shared them? When you feel the pains of aging, or the exhaustion of a long day, or the weight of family burdens, remember that the walls of that house in Nazareth are witnesses to a Savior who was intimately acquainted with the grit of human existence. He didn't avoid the ordinary life. He embraced it. He lived in the dampness of the cave home. He ate the simple lentils and bread of the poor, and he used stone vessels for purity because his family took their faith seriously, even when they had very little else. Those stone jars weren't just for show. They were a sign of a family that lived with intention, much like the way you might save your best china for a Sunday dinner, or keep your home just so out of respect for your heritage. This man, this master builder, eventually walked away from the safety of those stone walls. He left the workshop where he was respected and the home where he was loved, to become a wanderer who had nowhere to lay his head. That was an irreversible decision, a sacrifice of the highest order, but he carried the lessons of the stone with him. When he spoke to the crowds, he used the language of the builder. He talked about the cornerstone that the builders rejected. He talked about the cost of building a tower. He spoke with the authority of someone who had actually done the work. Doesn't it give you a sense of pride to know that the most important message in history was delivered by someone with calloused hands? We live in a world that often looks down on manual labor and prizes the superficial. But God chose the hands of a stonemason to change the world. He chose the nothing village of Nazareth to prove that the most extraordinary things are hidden in the most ordinary places. As we move forward, I want you to keep that image in your mind, the dusty, tired, but determined builder, because that is the man who truly understands your life. Let's step further into the shadows of this ancient home, into the very heart of the living space where the daily rhythm of life took place. I want you to look closely at the floor and the small alcoves carved into the walls. Do you see those fragments of stone? To a casual observer, they look like nothing more than broken rubble. But to those of us who understand the weight of tradition, they are a profound revelation. These are pieces of limestone vessels, cups, bowls, and jars. Now, why does that matter? In the world of that time, clay was the common material, but clay could become spiritually unclean. Stone, however, was different. According to the laws of the people, stone was immune to impurity. It stayed pure. When we find these stone vessels in this specific house, it tells us something vital about the family that lived here. They weren't just surviving, they were living with a deep, intentional devotion. They took their faith seriously. They kept these stone pieces like we might keep our very best china, reserved for Sunday dinners or special family gatherings. It was their seal of quality, a sign that even in a cave in a forgotten village, they were living a life set apart for something greater. Can you feel the dignity in that? Does it remind you of the ways you've tried to keep your own home a place of respect and values, even when the world outside seemed chaotic? I want you to imagine the atmosphere in this kitchen as evening falls. The air is thick with the scent of a simple meal, the earthy aroma of boiling lentils, the sharpness of crushed garlic, and the rich golden smell of olive oil heating over a small stone hearth. There is a quietness here that feels almost heavy. Imagine Mary, moving silently in the flickering light of a single oil lamp. She is a woman who has spent decades tending to this fire, cleaning these stone floors, and watching her son grow from a toddler running up those rock-hewn stairs into the man who now stands before her. There is a sensory comfort in this scene that we all recognize, the warmth of a central fire in the damp chill of winter, the way the thick limestone walls hold the coolness during a scorching July afternoon. It was a place of safety. It was a place of filled voids, where the lack of luxury was replaced by a presence that is hard to describe, but impossible to miss. Have you ever sat in a room that felt full even when it was empty, simply because of the love and the history that had soaked into the very walls? But now I want you to feel the tension shifting. The rhythm of the clink, clink, clink from the workshop has stopped. The tools have been wiped clean. The mallet is resting on the stone bench, and the fine white dust of the quarry is beginning to settle for the last time. We are approaching the point of no return. Imagine the protagonist of our story standing in the center of this small, familiar room. He looks at the stairs he carved with his own hands. He looks at the stone jars that have held the water for his thirst for 30 years. He looks at his mother, whose face is a map of the same history he is about to leave behind. This is the moment of the irreversible decision. It is the climax of a hidden life. Can you imagine the courage it took to walk toward that threshold? For 30 years he was the provider, the eldest son, the one who made sure the roof didn't leak and the family was fed. To leave was to leave behind the only security he had ever known. Think about the times in your own life when you had to make a choice that you knew would change everything forever. Maybe it was the day you moved away from your childhood home, or the moment you decided to start a family, or even the day you finally walked away from a career to embrace a new chapter. That feeling of your heart racing, the dry throat, the knowledge that once you step through that door, the person you were is gone, and the person you are meant to be must begin. This wasn't a casual departure. This was a transition of cosmic proportions. He was stepping out of the comfort of Mary's home to become the cornerstone of a faith that would span the globe. He was trading the safety of a roof for a life where he would have nowhere to lay his head. Can you see the dust motes dancing in that final beam of sunlight hitting the floor? He takes one last look at the ordinary life that had prepared him for the extraordinary. He knows that from this moment on, he will no longer be wrestling with limestone, but with the hearts of men. He will no longer be building houses of stone, but a kingdom that no hammer can destroy. The atmosphere is electric with purpose. There is no turning back. He steps out into the bright, blinding light of the Galilean sun, leaving the shadows of Nazareth behind. This is the point where the apprentice becomes the master, and the quiet builder begins the work of reconstruction for the entire human race. Doesn't it give you a surge of energy to realize that the greatest mission in history began with a single, courageous step out of a humble front door? What is the door you are standing in front of today? And what is the yes that God is waiting to hear from you? Let's hold on to that vigor, that absolute clarity of purpose, as we see what happens when the master builder finally starts his true work. I want you to take a deep breath and stay with me in this moment, because we are about to see how all those years of dust, sweat, and quiet labor finally bloomed into a purpose that changed the very fabric of time. When that young man stepped over the threshold of his stone home for the last time, he wasn't just leaving a building behind. He was carrying the architecture of that home within his very soul. Have you ever wondered why his words felt so solid, so unshakable, to the thousands of people who stood on hillsides just to hear him speak? It's because he wasn't a philosopher speaking from a high tower of ivory. He was a builder speaking from a lifetime of intimacy with the rock. Think back to that boy running up and down the stone stairs we saw in the ruins. Can you see him in your mind's eye? A young boy, full of life, his laughter echoing off those cool limestone walls. He wasn't born with all the answers handed to him on a silver platter. He had to grow. He had to learn. I imagine him sitting on that very floor, perhaps right where a beam of moonlight hit the stone, leaning close to a small, flickering oil lamp. The air would have been thick with the smell of olive oil and the scent of the old parchment as he studied the ancient scriptures. Every word he read about the promises of God was being filtered through the reality of his humble surroundings. He saw the struggle of his neighbors. He saw the dignity of a mother's work and the exhaustion of a father's hands. Don't you think that's why his message eventually touched the hearts of the poor and the forgotten so deeply? He knew their lives because he had lived every bit of it. Think about the stories he told later on, the parables that we've heard since we were children. When he spoke about the woman who lost a single silver coin and swept her house until she found it, he wasn't just making up a clever illustration. He had seen Mary do exactly that on those very stone floors, perhaps moving the heavy jars and searching the cracks in the rock where the light didn't reach. When he talked about the leaven hidden in the dough, he was remembering the smell of the kitchen as his mother prepared the bread that sustained them. And most importantly, when he told the story of the wise man who built his house upon the rock, he wasn't speaking in metaphors. He was speaking from experience. He knew what happened to a house when the winter rains turned the dry valleys into raging torrents. He knew that if the foundation wasn't carved into the living stone, everything would be lost. Now let's bring this home to you and me right here in the present. We are at a stage in our journey where we've seen plenty of storms, haven't we? We've seen seasons of health and seasons of pain. We've seen things we thought were permanent crumble like dry clay. But isn't it a magnificent comfort to realize that our Master spent 30 years learning how to build things that last? He didn't come to offer us a flimsy, temporary hope. He came to show us how to carve our lives into the eternal rock. The result of his decision to live that ordinary, difficult, dusty life in Nazareth is that now, no matter how humble your own home is, or how tired your body feels, your life is saturated with his presence. He sanctified the kitchen. He sanctified the workshop. He sanctified the quiet, lonely corners of a routine life. What is the solid truth we can take away from those ruins under the convent? It is this: God does not need a cathedral to do his greatest work. He only needs a willing heart and a bit of solid ground. The fulfillment of his purpose wasn't just in the miracles he performed later. It was in the 30 years of being faithful in the nothing village of Nazareth. He proved that holiness is found in the way you treat your neighbor, the way you handle your tools, and the way you hold your family together when the money is short. Do you feel the weight of that dignity returning to your own shoulders today? Sometimes we feel that our best years are behind us, or that our simple lives haven't made a mark on the world. But look at that house. It was hidden for 2,000 years, ignored by historians and kings, yet it was the most important place on earth. Your life, your prayers, and your quiet acts of faith are being recorded in the same way. Nothing you have built with love is ever lost. The master builder knows your address. He knows the texture of your walls and the weight of your burdens. And just as he turned the dust of Nazareth into the cornerstone of eternity, he is turning your journey into something that will stand long after the stars have faded. Isn't it wonderful to know that we are not building on sand? As we look at those ancient stones one last time, let's stand a little taller. We are part of a lineage of builders. We are part of a story that started in a cave and ended by opening the gates of heaven. The decision he made to walk out of that door was a decision to walk into our lives, bringing the strength of the rock with him. So I ask you, as you look at your own hands today, what are you building with the time you have left? Are you ready to trust that the same hands that carved those stairs in Nazareth are holding you right now? Let that be your peace. Let that be your solid ground. Our home isn't just a place we live. It's a foundation for the eternity that is waiting just around the corner. I have been sitting here in the quiet of my office, looking at the photos of those ancient stone walls in Nazareth, and I couldn't help but think of you. I think about where you are right now, perhaps sitting in your favorite chair, or looking out at a garden you've spent years tending. We are in a season of life that the world often misinterprets. They look at us and see the evening of a journey, a time to slow down, or perhaps a time when our stories are mostly written in the past. But let me tell you something from my heart to yours. As I look at the ruins of that humble home where the master builder grew up, I realize that you and I are not just spectators of history. We are the living keepers of the rock. Does it ever feel like the world around you has become unrecognizable? Do you look at the way people live today, rushing from one disposable thing to another, building their lives on the digital sand of social media and temporary trends, and feel a bit like a stranger in your own land? I feel it too. We belong to a generation that understands the value of something built to last. We know what it means to repair what is broken instead of throwing it away. We are like those limestone vessels found in the basement of Nazareth. We might have a few chips and cracks, but we were made for purity, and we were made to endure. Think about the silence in your home today. Maybe the children have long since moved away to start their own lives in distant cities. Maybe the chair across from you is empty, and the silence feels less like peace and more like a heavy weight. When you walk through your rooms and see the marks on the door frames, or the fading photos on the mantel, do you ever find yourself wondering if all that effort, all those years of sacrifice and labor, truly left a mark? It is in those moments of quiet reflection that I want you to remember the forgotten address we've been discussing. For 2,000 years, the most important house in the world was buried under layers of dirt, hidden from view, and ignored by the great empires. But it wasn't gone. It was being preserved. Your life is exactly the same. Every prayer you whispered in the dark, every meal you prepared with tired hands, every time you chose to be faithful when it would have been easier to quit, none of it is lost. It is all being preserved in the memory of the one who knows what it's like to live in a humble house. Let me ask you a very personal question. What is the storm you are facing today? Perhaps it is a report from a doctor that has shaken your sense of security. Perhaps it is the fear of being forgotten, or the anxiety of how you will handle the years ahead. We've seen a lot of winters, haven't we? We've seen the rains come and the winds blow. But remember the lesson of the master builder. He didn't tell us to build on the rock because it was easy. He told us to build there because the rock doesn't move. You are a tecton of your own soul. You have spent decades carving your character out of the hard circumstances of life. You have the seal of quality that only comes from experience. Do not let the world tell you that you are fragile. You are made of the same resilient spirit that saw a young man walk out of a Nazareth cave to change the world. I want to encourage you to look at your legacy not as a pile of things you are leaving behind, but as a foundation you have laid for those who come after you. Your grandchildren might not understand the value of the stone vessels yet. They might be caught up in the plastic world of the present. But one day the storms will hit them too. And when they look for a place of safety, they will remember the strength they saw in you. They will remember the way you stood firm. They will remember the architecture of faith that you built in your own home. Isn't that a magnificent purpose to have in this stage of our lives? To be the evidence that a life built on the rock can survive anything? There is a vigor that comes with knowing the truth. I want you to stand a little taller today. Shake off the dust of discouragement. Your story isn't over. It is reaching its most profound chapter. The master who carved those stairs in Nazareth is the same one who is preparing a place for you even now. He knows your address. He knows your struggles. And he is saying to you, "Well done, my good and faithful builder." We are not fading away. We are being refined. We are the stones that the world might ignore, but we are the stones that hold the whole structure together. Before we finish our conversation today, I want you to do something for me. Reach out and touch a wall in your house, or the wood of the table in front of you. Feel that solidity. Let it remind you that you are anchored to something eternal. We are part of a story that started in the dust and ends in the light. So, hold your head high. Keep your heart set on the rock. And remember, as long as there is breath in your lungs, you are still building something that will stand for eternity. I am proud to walk this path with you. Let's keep going, because the best is yet to come, and our true home is closer than it has ever been. As I sit here in the quiet of my office, watching the afternoon sun begin its slow descent, I find myself reluctant to leave the world we've just explored together. We've traveled across oceans and through 2,000 years of dust to stand in a basement in Nazareth, touching the very stones that shaped the Savior of the world. It's a profound thing, isn't it? To realize that the greatest story ever told didn't begin in a cloud of glory, but in the grit and silence of a limestone cave. As we prepare to close this chapter of our conversation, I want you to take one more look at those ancient ruins with me. Archaeology, as fascinating as it is, cannot prove divinity. It cannot prove that a man is the Son of God. But what it does with absolute, unshakable certainty is prove presence. It proves that he was here. He was real. He breathed the same air we breathe. He felt the same heat of the sun, and he knew the weight of a heavy day just as you and I do. Does that realization bring a sense of warmth to your heart? To know that when we speak of our faith, we aren't talking about a fairy tale or a distant philosophy, but about a neighbor, a man who knew how to fix a door, how to carve a step, and how to honor his mother in a house that smelled of lentils and wood smoke. As I look out my window now, seeing the shadows stretch across my own desk, I am struck by a beautiful truth. If the mansion of the King of Kings was a simple stone cave in a forgotten village, then you and I have absolutely everything we need to be visited by the divine right where we are. You don't need a marble palace. You don't need a life of fame or a bank account full of gold to be significant in the eyes of the Creator. Your kitchen, your garden, your quiet living room, these are the modern-day Nazareths where the most important work of eternity is happening. I want to ask you a question as we sit here, friend to friend. Do you feel a renewed sense of pride in the life you've built? I hope you do. I hope you look at your calloused hands or the lines of wisdom on your face and see them not as marks of age, but as the seal of quality on a life well lived. We are part of a lineage of builders, you and I. We are the ones who know that the foundation is more important than the decoration. We are the ones who understand that a house on the rock is the only thing that stands when the winters of life get cold. There is such a vigor in that knowledge. It's an injection of life into our souls to remember that we aren't just drifting through time. We are carving our legacy into the eternal rock, just like the Tecton of Nazareth did so long ago. I truly feel that these weekly conversations of ours are becoming something sacred, a gathering of old friends who still believe that the old ways, the solid ways, are the best ways. I don't want this to be the end of our journey. In fact, I feel like we are just getting started. There are so many more forgotten addresses to find, so many more truths hidden under the dust of history that are waiting to remind us of who we truly are. If you felt a spark of inspiration today, if you felt your spirit stand a little taller as we walked through those ancient rooms, then I want to invite you to join our circle officially. It would mean a great deal to me if you would subscribe to this channel and become a permanent part of this community. It's not about numbers or fame. It's about making sure that this message of dignity and faith reaches every person who feels forgotten by the modern world. And please, don't keep this discovery to yourself. Think of one person, perhaps a friend who is struggling with the weight of their years, or a grandchild who needs to know that life is built on more than just screens and shadows, and share this video with them. Let's be the ones who pass the hammer and the chisel to the next generation. Let's be the ones who remind the world that nothing built with love and faith is ever truly lost. As the sun sets over the hills of Nazareth and over the roof of your own home, I want you to breathe in the peace of the Master Builder. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are living in a house that God Himself knows by heart. I'll be right here in my office next week, waiting for you, with another story to tell and another truth to uncover. Until then, keep your heart set on the solid ground. Keep your hands busy with good work, and remember that the best is yet to come. Our true home is much closer than it appears. I'll see you very soon, my friend. Stay strong and stay faithful.